הקדמה to Masechta Rosh Hashanah. The Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah, which falls out on the first day of the month of Tishrei, which is the first day of the new year, it's on this date that HaKadosh Baruch Hu sits in judgment over all mankind to decree their fate for the upcoming year. And it is on this date that the Torah decrees that we blow the shofar, so that it will be remembered favorably when we are judged. Furthermore, this date marks the creation of the world and mankind according to at least one sheet in the Gemara. However, Rosh Hashanah is not the beginning of the year in every context. In some areas of halacha, the new year indeed begins on the first of Tishrei, but in other areas of halacha, the new year begins on a different date. For example, on Tu B'Shvat is the Rosh Hashanah Li'ilanos, is the new year for trees, which is relevant to the Hilchas Trumas and Maisos from the fruit of trees. Our Masechta begins with a list of all the different new years, all the different Rosh Hashanahs. After dealing with the beginning of the years, the Masechta turns its attention to the beginning of the months, Rosh Chodesh. The months of the Jewish calendar are based on the cycles of the moon, with each month starting when the moon first becomes visible as a narrow crescent. From the times of the Chumash through the times of the Mishnayos and even later, the beginning of the new month, Rosh Chodesh, was not determined by a fixed calendar. People who saw the first appearance of the moon would go before a Bezdin, which is a panel of at least 3 judges who were members of Sanhedrin HaGadol, and tell the judges what they had seen. Based on the Eidos, based on the witnesses' testimony, the Dayanim would decide whether that is Rosh Chodesh. About half of the Masechta is devoted to this subject. The final 2 program of this Masechta deal with Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah, specifically in 2 special features: the sounding of the shofar and the Tfilas HaMosafin, which we know it as Malchus, Achernis, and Shofars. To understand the halachas of how Bezdin established the Rosh Chodesh, an introduction is required. The secular calendar used in the Western world is based entirely on the solar cycle, meaning that the length of the year equals the time it takes for the earth to go once around the sun, which is around 365 and a quarter days. However, the year's division into 12 months, of between 28 and 31 days, is not based on any astronomical cycle. There's no natural event that dictates which day should be the first of the month, or even that the year should be divided into 12 monthly units, rather than 5, 15, or 20. This is not the case with the Jewish calendar, in which the months are based on the lunar cycle, with each month corresponding to 1 revolution of the moon around the earth. 12 of these lunar months make up a year. As the moon moves around the earth, it reaches a point where it is exactly between the earth and the sun. That position is known as the conjunction of the moon and the sun as observed from the earth. What is meant by conjunction is that the earth, the moon, and sun have the same celestial longitude. The moon's celestial latitude, however, will generally be higher or lower than the plane of the earth's orbit around the sun, because the path of the moon's orbit around the earth is inclined some 5 degrees to that plane. On the rare occasion that the moon at conjunction with the sun also happens to occupy the same latitude as the plane of the earth's orbit, placing the earth, moon, and sun in a direct line in both celestial longitude and latitude, that's when we experience a solar eclipse in which the moon blocks the view of the sun and the earth. Right, so that's that. The length of time between such conjunctions is 29 days, 12 hours, 44 minutes, and 3 1/3 seconds. Our Chachamim didn't divide the hour into minutes and seconds, but rather into chalokim. Chalokim are parts of which there are 1,080 in an hour. So each chalak equals 3 1/3 seconds, or 1/18 of a minute. Thus, the duration of the moon's revolution is 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 chalokim. The precise moment of the moiled, at which the moon completes its revolution of the earth to begin a new revolution, is called the moiled halavana, the birth of the moon, or moiled for short. The time between one moiled and the next is the duration of the moon, which is 29 days, and that's when they make the announcement on Shabbos Mevarchim, that's when the moiled is going to be. Now, the MS is that the moiled is always, it doesn't make a difference when Rosh Chodesh is, but the moiled is always going to be the exact same time. And the Rosh Chodesh wasn't based on the moiled, the Rosh Chodesh was based on the Haggadas Eidos of when the people saw the Levana. So there's 2 things going on over here. There's the moiled, which is automatic, which is not up to anybody, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and us making Rosh Chodesh is dependent on when Bezdin decides. Now that was when Kolzman they didn't have an established calendar. Now that we have an established calendar, so we know exactly when everything is going to be. Now you have to talk to the calendar people that know all the chachmas and all the cheshbonis and all the Torahs, when, this is the one time in 30 years that we learn this in the Haftarah, but Amal will discuss it, Amal not. But this comes up in many areas of halacha, many places throughout Shas, and it's important to know the details. If the moon had its own light, it would always appear to us as full, like the sun or the star. However, the moon has no light of its own, rather it reflects the light of the sun. Depending upon the moon's position relative to the sun and the earth, it appears to us in different shapes, ranging from a thin crescent to a full circle. As explained before, the moon at one point in its cycle, during the Moiled, lies between the sun and the earth. When that happens, the side of the moon that always faces the earth does not receive any light from the sun, with the result that the moon is totally invisible to us. A number of hours later, as it moves out of its position between the sun and the earth, the moon begins to reflect some sunlight towards the earth. A small part of the moon then becomes visible as a very thin crescent. It would seem, based on the above, that the Jewish month should always be at the beginning of the Moiled, and its duration should always be a constant 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 chalokim. Neither of these conditions, however, is possible. We are commanded to establish Rosh Chodesh al pi Riyah based on the sighting of the moon. And as we mentioned earlier, the moon cannot be seen at the moment of the Moiled. Furthermore, months cannot begin at constant intervals of 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 chalokim, because the Torah commands that months have to consist of a whole day and not a fraction of a day. So a month cannot start or end in the middle of the day. This then prevents our using the moment of the Moiled as the start of the month. The Torah teaches us in Parashas Bo, this month shall be for you the first of the months. This verse contains a commandment that the Bezdin perform Kiddush HaChodesh, sanctifying the new month. Based on certain factors, the Bezdin has to determine which day is Rosh Chodesh and then declare that day to have the Kedusha of Rosh Chodesh. The Chiyuv applied to the Sanhedrin HaGadol of 71 judges, which is the highest court of the land. However, any 3 members of Sanhedrin HaGadol may act on behalf of the full court, and it may even appoint non-members to proclaim Rosh Chodesh, provided that these non-members too have the proper smicha and obviously have the proper understanding of the concept of the Moiled and Kiddush HaChodesh. Except under extraordinary circumstances, the mitzvah of being Mekadosh Rosh Chodesh, being Mekadosh the Chodesh, must be performed in Eretz Yisrael. In order to make its determination, the Bezdin, which is the Bezdin of the 3 Dayanim appointed to sanctify Rosh Chodesh, relied on the testimony of people who claimed to have seen the new moon, which is the moon's first visible crescent. In its modern scientific sense, the term new moon refers to the moment of conjunction itself, meaning the time of the Moiled itself, when the moon cannot be seen from Earth at all. However, we are using it in its original sense of the moon's first appearance as a narrow crescent, which takes place a few hours after the Moiled. These people must be eligible witnesses who are fit to give testimony before a Bezdin. After deciding that the witnesses are eligible and the testimony is reliable, the Bezdin would be Mekadosh that day and declare it to be Rosh Chodesh. The Bezdin also relied on a great deal of other astronomical information, including the timing of the Moiled, to check whether the witnesses were telling the truth. For example, if the Edom claimed to have seen the new moon before the Moiled, or if they described it as being in a position that did not accord with the astronomical calculations, their edus was rejected. If the witnesses testified on the 30th day of the outgoing month, and their testimony was accepted, that day was declared to be Rosh Chodesh. In such a case, the previous month had only 29 days and was called a Chaser, because they had less than the full 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 chalakim of the lunar cycle. If Edom did not testify on the 30th day, the next day would automatically become Rosh Chodesh without the declaration of the Bezdin. In that case, the previous month contained 30 days and was called Malay, or a Chodesh Me'uber, a pregnant, because they had more than 29 days, 12 hours, and 793 chalakim of the lunar cycle. Since the 30th day might be Rosh Chodesh, it's treated as Rosh Chodesh even before the Bezdin declared it as such. So if Rosh Chodesh is not until the 31st, 2 days of Rosh Chodesh are observed. The first, which is the 30th day, being the last day of the outgoing month, and the second day of Rosh Chodesh, the 31st day, being the first of the incoming month. Yamim Tovim and the Zmanim of Shtaros are counted from the second day, meaning because that's the first day of the month. Since Rosh Chodesh could fall on either one of 2 days, the same suffix existed in regard to any Yom Tov that begins on a specific date of that month, which is what's called Sveika D'Yoma. Therefore, once Bezdin made that decision, they informed the people so that they could celebrate Yamim Tovim on the proper date. People living in distant places who could not be informed in time had to celebrate Yom Tov for 2 days, since they didn't know which of the 2 days was actually Yom Tov. This is the source of celebrating a 2-day Yom Tov outside of Eretz Yisrael. This method of determining which days Rosh Chodesh was used until the year 4118 after creation. At that time, Jewish communal life in Eretz Yisrael was at risk of collapse due to foreign persecution, and the very institution of the Sanhedrin itself was in danger. Hillel, who was the 13th generation of Hillel HaZokeh, direct descendant, who was the Reish Sanhedrin, established the current Jewish calendar and ended the process being Mekadesh L'Chodesh based on Riyah. Using astronomical and halachic calculations, he and his Bezdin devised the system in use today and sanctified every Rosh Chodesh until the coming of Mashiach, when the Kedusha, when the being Mekadesh L'Chodesh based on Riyah will be restored. B'mheira v'yameinu. Amen.